This video is now in session, and today we're going to be talking about the Virginia Gubernatorial Election. So yesterday we talked about the New Jersey governor's election, and now we're talking about this race, which could actually be competitive for Republicans. Even though Virginia has been very Democratic and has been trended Democratic recently, it might actually vote for the Republican nominee, who this year is Glenn Youngkin. So, similar to New Jersey, Virginia votes its governors in odd years for 4-year cycles, so 1 year after a presidential year. So, for this, there's Glenn Youngkin representing the Republican nomination, and for the Democratic nomination process, they have not nominated anyone just yet. And that will be done by a regular primary, but it is likely that Terry McAuliffe, who was the former governor of Virginia, will beat out all of the other potential candidates like Justin Fairfax, who's currently the lieutenant governor. And you can see by polling here that Terry McAuliffe has been trending more and more in the favorable status. He might actually get 50% of the vote, and according to polls, he's been doing very well, double-digit leads against everyone else. And the second place contestant, Justin Fairfax, who is the lieutenant governor, has been polling pretty terribly in comparison to Terry McAuliffe. And ever since McAuliffe announced that he was going to run for the 2021 governor's election, Democrats have pretty much coalesced around him in comparison to Justin Fairfax, who, if Terry McAuliffe did not run, would most likely be the front runner. So the reason why Democrats are coalescing around McAuliffe and not Fairfax is that McAuliffe was the governor of Virginia, and that might seem weird because usually governors don't run again. That happens very rarely, but Virginia has a rule stating that you cannot run consecutive elections. So you can't run like in 2000. You can't run in 2013, and then you can't run again in 2017. That said, you can run again in 2021, and that's exactly what McAuliffe is doing by running now instead of 2017 when he was the governor. So he will most likely win out. Now, in terms of the Republican side with Glenn Youngkin, he was decided by not a regular process. Republicans originally wanted to do a primary, and that was what was scheduled. But Amanda Chase was running for the Virginia governor's election, and she positioned herself somewhat similarly to Marjorie Taylor Greene or Kelly Loeffler or any very, very Republican, very right-wing candidate, and that would have won her the nomination. And Virginia Republicans realized this, so as a result, they switched over to a convention model instead of a primary model. So the convention involves a set of Republican delegates who then vote on behalf of Virginia Republicans on the best candidate. So Amanda Chase was defeated at the convention, and Glenn Youngkin won it. Now, Youngkin is one of the best Republican nominees that Republicans could choose, and they in fact did choose him. He's much more moderate than Amanda Chase, and he also focuses a lot on the economy, which is what the main issue will most likely be in the 2021 election. And he was the former co-CEO of the Carlyle Group. Now, that is the only thing that would detract some voters from him, because the Carlyle Group does do some shady business, but ultimately Glenn Youngkin will most likely do just fine in the general election. Now, in terms of Republicans having a chance, they do have a chance in Virginia. I'd peg it around 35% chance or maybe 25% chance in terms of them winning, which is more than usual, by the way. In 2017, it was way lower, but in the 2021 election, it's much higher because Joe Biden is currently the president and he is a Democrat. So Democrats usually would be punished in these races, but we'll have to see in 2021 with Virginia becoming more Democratic and New Jersey, which we mentioned in the last video, also becoming more Democratic. You can see here that Virginia, Biden won it by double digits, something which that hasn't happened for a Democrat for several decades at this point. Biden won it by 10.1 percentage points, and that would most likely give some cushion for Terry McAuliffe or whoever the Democratic nominee is come November 2nd. And now there's one thing that could kind of turn this race upside down, which is Amanda Chase. So I mentioned Amanda Chase earlier, who is close, kind of getting close to a nationalist. But Amanda Chase nonetheless is a very far right candidate. So she could actually turn the race over. She said in December that because of the Republican convention, if she doesn't win it, then she would run as an independent. And then she kind of reversed on those comments a few days later in December. And then just a few days ago, she reversed again, saying she might run as an independent. So ultimately, even though there's a lot of flip-flopping, Amanda Chase could ultimately run as an independent, somewhat similar to how Lisa Murkowski ran as an independent in 2010. So it's something that could turn the race upside down, because Amanda Chase will most likely get a lot of the Trump voters, and Virginia Republicans realize that. They realize that if Amanda Chase ran as an independent, then Terry McAuliffe from the Democrats would most likely soar to re-election. So that's why Donald Trump announced that he was endorsing Glenn Youngkin. If we go to the endorsements list and go over to Glenn Youngkin, you can see right here Donald Trump endorsed him for Virginia gubernatorial race in retrospect to Amanda Chase, who might seem more like a Donald Trump kind of candidate. So Donald Trump, whether he was coerced into doing this or whether he wanted to do this, ultimately that endorsement will probably fend off Amanda Chase from running as an independent. But if she does run as an independent, she will certainly get votes, and she will certainly take away votes from Glenn Youngkin and make the race uncompetitive. But whatever happens between now and the general election, it will ultimately be a bellwether as to whether Democrats can win in somewhat competitive races or not. If Democrats win by only 2 percentage points, like they did in the 2013 election, where Barack Obama was president at the time, if they win by around like 2 percentage points, then they are in a very bad position, because even though they won by 2.5 percentage points in the 2013 election, in 2013 Virginia was much more Republican than it is now. So if they do get those margins again, that's not a good sign for them. If they get 2017 margins though, then Democrats are in a much better place, where if they're able to get Fairfax County by likely margins, or past likely margins actually, and they're able to get the Norfolk suburbs and the Richmond suburbs, then they'll most likely be in a much better position. But otherwise, they would be in a horrible position for 2022, and that's kind of replicated across the other elections happening in 2021, like the New Jersey gubernatorial election and as well as the California recall election. All of these 3 races are most likely going to be won by Democrats, but it's just a question of margins, not actually if they're going to win. Obviously, Glenn Youngkin still has a chance to win, but it's more favored to the Democrats, and ultimately it will be a question of margins rather than a question of who wins. So that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. This video is now adjourned, and I'll see you in the next one.